Another thing you say in your book is that you make a mention that and this is the sort of thing I would do, that some of the foliage has got pest damage and that sort of thing, and then you explain why, because you don't use insecticides and pesticides at your nursery. Um, so can you talk about that a little bit? Maybe why you don't, but also, so how do you deal with problems when they arise in your nursery when a pest shows up?
Well, it's interesting that when I first started growing roses, there were some roses that were very affected by aphids, for instance. And so what we would go in is I was going to be organic. So, oh yeah, I'll use insecticidal soap. That's non-toxic, whatever. And so we sprayed them with soap. And within a couple of weeks, bang, there were more aphids than there were in the first place.
Right.
And so we'd spray them again. And then after a couple of years, I realized that what I was doing was I was creating a race of aphids that was, completely immune to insecticidal soap.
Super
And
aphids. Yeah.
that got me wondering about my whole approach. And so now what I do is we take care of the soil, we prune off any dead diseased wood, and we let nature take its course. And so now when I see an aphid colony, if I look very closely, I will see very tiny larvae of things like ladybug larvae. There will be syrphid fly larvae. You have spiders that will feed on aphids. There are numerous insects, birds and so forth that feed on them. And what you will find, and I once stood, or actually I wasn't standing, I was in underneath a Grutendorf's rose, which is the worst for aphids I've ever seen. And what I did was for an hour, I sat there and I watched a ladybug larvae spear an aphid, lift it up, suck it dry, and put it down, go to the next one. It took 5 minutes for each feeding on each aphid, and you could actually see the color of the larvae changing from clear to gray. And it convinced me that there are always predators for the pests.
Yes.
And if we go in there wholesale spraying, we kill not only the pests, but the predators. And
Yes.
it takes longer for the predators to reestablish themselves. If we grit our teeth when those aphids first come and let nature take its course, the predators rule the plant.
Right.
And literally within a day, something like that larvae will clean out a colony. And so you need to relax. Nature will not overwhelm you. Now, there are exceptions. For instance, if we get various forms of larvae that are, completely skeletonizing the plant, then I might use something like a pyrethrin, which is
Yep.
non-toxic to mammals. It has very short lifespan, and so you can actually spray it on vegetables and eat them at the end of the day without fear. And it's very toxic to most insects.
Yep.
And we also, if it's a butterfly larvae, we can use something like BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, and that will, as they eat that bacterium, that they will die.
Yep.
So there are various things you could use that are non-toxic and very specific.
Yep.
Another thing that we use, for instance, is a specific bacterium that attacks crown gall. Crown gall is present in most soils, and in the Rosaceae family, it feeds on the root system.
Mm.
And it doesn't usually kill a plant, but it will reduce vigor sometimes substantially. And you certainly don't want to sell a plant that has crown gall. And what we do now is we dip the roots of the new cuttings in this bacterium, which is actually closely related to the crown gall bacteria, and it feeds on the crown gall bacteria. So it's extremely specific. You don't have to worry. It's not a poison. And we just dip them, plant them, and now, boom, you don't have crown gall.
Your approach is very similar to mine, because if you have a mulched bed, a mulched garden, one of the first things maybe the first year you have an incredible growth in your garden because, you know, for the first time ever as a gardener, you've got constant moisture because the mulch is taking care of it. And then the very next year, everything's decimated by slugs and snails and flea because you've created a perfect environment for them to live and be safe, right? Free or, you know, and not every predator in the neighborhood knows that your garden is the place to be right off the bat. And so, I mean, a lot of the literature, part of the reason I have a podcast and a YouTube channel and am writing a book is because a lot of the proponents of no-till gardening, heavy mulched beds, they don't talk about the first few years where you're waiting for these predators to show up. They just say everything, it's nature and it's all balanced and everything will just solve itself. And it will eventually, but you might not get to eat zucchini for 3 years or while that you're waiting for this thing to happen, right? So I have a very similar, I use BTK if I have to. Last year was the first year I didn't have to use any. And just like that story you're telling, I remember sitting and watching a wasp come in, grab a juvenile white fly caterpillar, and fly away with it, and then come back, and it's probably not the same wasp, but another wasp show up, grab another one, fly away with it, and over. And I remember the pleasure I took in watching those wasps kill those caterpillars. And I said, well, I'm just going to let things, every year I'd have to maybe do 2 treatments of BTK on my brassicas, like kale. And I didn't do anything last year, and it all sorted itself out. And I noticed this year, I mean, slugs and snails are still a bit of a problem, but every year I seem to notice more and more birds in my garden, all kinds of them. And so, I think, last year, this year, I think I've got at least 4 robins nested on my property. I got almost 2 acres here, and they're all there all the time, just rooting through, finding stuff. I mean, they're taking some worms and stuff like that too. But I imagine a snail is probably the easiest thing. You can see they throw the mulch around. It's thrown all over the place. And they're just looking for these easy meals sort of things. So it's so much. And I do the same sort of thing. If I'm at the risk of completely losing something, I'll step in. But if it's just minor damage, a hole here, a hole there, I'm not selling the stuff in the market. I don't care. It's still perfectly fine to eat. So I'm perfectly happy to let the pests hang around a little bit, because I know it's going to bring in the thing that handles the pest, so I don't have to bother with it. So that's very interesting.